This is a light armored reconnaissance battalion. Its main task in any conflict is to roam far ahead of the main battle group. It seeks out the enemy. It engages the enemy. It draws it out, if you will, so that the follow-on forces can wrap up that particular unit, and then this unit will leapfrog ahead again to try to draw out the next one. We're right now in the middle of the so-called no man's land between Iraq and Kuwait that has existed since the 1991 Gulf War. What you're looking at now is the electric fence that separates the two countries. From there, it's another 2 kilometers to the Iraqi border. So the enemy lies just on the other side of that fence. This unit doesn't quite know what to expect. It is hoping that the bombardments that the enemy underwent during the course of the night and through part of yesterday will have demoralized it to the point where it will just basically give up. There's a couple of main regular Army divisions, the 18th Division, the 51st Division. The United States has done a lot of intelligence on these particular units, and they believe that given the opportunity and an overwhelming show of force by the United States, that these two divisions would probably rather choose to not fight than to fight. But judging by the bombardment that we witnessed all night, here as you take a look at the end of the column that's following us on here, judging by the bombardment that we saw taking place all night, those troops would have to be pretty demoralized by now.
Into Iraq. He joins us tonight live from inside Iraq with the U.S. Marines. John.
Dan, we are indeed inside southern Iraq, and we just started moving again after a brief pause, if you can believe it. Out here in the middle of the barren Iraqi desert, there was a bit of a traffic jam. You have thousands of Marine vehicles all funneling into this area, and sometimes they tend to get in each other's way. I just also wanted to pass along that there was a little bit of concern not too long ago. One of the so-called Fox vehicles, these are the vehicles that go out looking for chemical and biological weapons, nuclear, biological, chemical monitoring vehicles, was monitoring, and repeat, only monitoring for possible nerve agent. Again, repeating that, only monitoring for a possible nerve agent. They reported back a short time ago that they had found nothing. Now, it is interesting to note, too, that with the Scud missiles that Saddam Hussein's forces fired at Kuwait City yesterday, and some of the other fire that has been shot across the border, none of it appears to be of a chemical or a biological nature at this point. We're just making our way through one of the many lanes here in the southern Iraqi desert, and if I could, I'd like to just kind of show you the type of conditions that the troops are dealing with here. Take a look at the front of our vehicle. Here's a camera at the front of our vehicle. The choking dust of this desert, the sand is a consistency almost like talcum powder, and you can see that it just completely obliterates your line of sight, and it makes driving very, very difficult. Kirk Spitzer, who is our able driver there, who you can see right in front of me, did a tremendous job getting us up to the border last night, and doing another great job today driving in this choking dust. At one point last night, we thought that we had fallen off of the main column, but Kirk managed to get us right back on. Producer Randall Joyce here as well in the front seat here, as we switch to our internal cameras. And if you want to take a look at what's happening at the back now, again, the dust is sort of choking this. We'll clean this off as the day goes on, but there's the rest of the column that's coming behind us. So back inside the vehicle now, Dan. We're just driving through the Iraqi desert. Destination known but not reportable at this point, but we'll stay with you as the Marines, the 1st Marine Division, makes its way into southern Iraq. Dan?
John, what kind of vehicle, if we can even call it that, are you bouncing around in there?
Well, Dan, we like to call it the secret Squirrel, but it's a marvel of technology that's able to transmit live as we roar through the desert, at times up to 50 miles per hour. And we've got these cameras mounted inside and outside. It also has live capability when we're stationary, so that if we're in let's say a refueling stop or a water supply stop or something like that, we are able to go up and broadcast live as well. So we've got the capability to go through the desert and broadcast live as the troops push in, and then we can also go when we're standing still, stationary.
John, I don't want to be flip about it, but if the Marines have any extra heavy-duty shock absorbers, let us recommend that you get some. But let's move on to the more substantive material here. I didn't have any idea until you showed us through the windshield.
Actually,
go ahead, John.
No, go ahead, Dan. I was just going to say that this road is actually pretty smooth compared to some of the ones that we've been on lately.
And John, I had no idea that the sand was this thick. When we talk about the fog of war, it's usually a metaphor. Here you have, in effect, sand fog. Let's set aside the question of whose idea it was to launch this kind of offensive in this kind of sand conditions deep into the sandstorm season. Let's set that aside for the moment. How much of an impediment, how much does this slow down the advance of the Marines you're with?
It doesn't really slow it down, Dan, when you're talking just about the sort of dust that's kicked up by a vehicle. It just means you really got to keep your head on a swivel and make sure that you keep an eye on the vehicle in front of you. Where it really tends to bog down operations is when you get those sand storms that kick up. And they create a real choking dust that completely obscure visibility. Obviously, the GPS-guided bombs, the JDAMs as they're called, Joint Direct Attack Munitions, still function very well because they're working off of satellites. But anything where you need line of sight or laser guiding or anything like that is extremely affected by sandstorms. It can also slow down the movement of armored columns as well, and certainly infantry has a difficult time when the sand is blowing. This is really just being kicked up by the vehicles, but you can imagine we had a little bit of trouble last night. We thought we were inside Iraq when we were actually still on the Kuwaiti side of the border. It's because when you're wearing night vision goggles and you see that cloud of sand kick up in front of you, there's absolutely no light whatsoever to be amplified by the night vision goggles, and it's like being in the middle of a blizzard or being in the middle of a vanilla milkshake. You cannot see literally the front of the vehicle. Now looking off to our side here, let me pick up our remote camera here. If I could, we seem to see a line of vehicles off to the left there. It's a line of camels. Through the smoke in my aging eyes, it's difficult to tell what's what. But there is the ship of the desert out there to the side. Some of what we're seeing as we travel through the desert here. The one thing that we haven't encountered, and it's been kind of unusual, is there have been no opposing forces that have been sighted so far. Now, obviously, we have some lead elements of this battalion that are roaming far in front of us, who are making sure that all of the lanes are cleared. But so far, there's been absolutely no sight of any Iraqi forces. I have to say that there was heavy bombardment last night. They were just pounding these units. The 18th Division, the 51st Division, with artillery. Shells were falling at the rate of 1 a second at a 30-minute barrage. Then they take a 30-minute break to rearm, and then they'd be back at it again, a shell a second for another 30 minutes. We saw them from our pre-positioning point just south of the berm that marks the northernmost point of the Kuwaiti border. We saw them dropping bombs all night long. There's a hill to the north, just to the north of the Iraq-Kuwaiti border, and I think I'm good in saying this because this was supposed to be attacked last night. It's called Safwan Hill. It's an observation post. It's a listening post. And the U.S. military, changing again here to got our camera up and a helicopter up in the sky there, as you can see. But the U.S. military wanted to take away the Iraqi military's eyes. And so what they did was they dropped at least 20 JDAM bombs, these Joint Direct Attack Munitions with the GPS guide, and a bunch of napalm on the top of that hill. They said that the elevation of the hill was 441 feet when they started. It would be 421 feet when they finished. They plan to take 20 feet off of the top of that mountain. And the reason why they dropped the napalm was they said that they wanted to send up a signal flare so that the 51st and the 18th Iraqi divisions could see that from a long way off, know what they were up against, and the U.S. military's intention with that was to encourage them to lay down their weapons. They're trying as much as possible here to minimize Iraqi casualties, to minimize the possibility of American casualties by trying to convince these divisions to surrender. Now, there's a famous story that was rolling around the camp that we were at last week that one of the division generals called his Iraqi counterpart on his cell phone. He got the cell phone number of this Iraqi general, and he said, when the shooting starts, meet me on the border and surrender, or you will be annihilated. So this is part of the psychological operations, the psyops that the U.S. military is engaging in as well, Dan.
John, a small question. First of all, let me say, to see you live by video phone traveling along there with a camel, we don't know whether it's a camel caravan or couldn't tell whether it was just a herd of camels, if you will, off to the left as you travel along. This is further indication that this is the first information war. But John, about how fast you're traveling, how many miles per hour? Take a look down there at the speedometer. About what's your speed?
Oh, right now it's not very much. It's about 3 miles per hour. We've slowed down again, but I think we got up to about 40 miles an hour during a couple of those runs there. And these light armored vehicles that the second Light Armored Reconnaissance Battalion out of Camp Lejeune, North Carolina uses are capable of doing 50 or 60 miles an hour across rough and open terrain. So this battalion, as I mentioned before, is really the tip of the spear. It goes in. It's tasked with, in any engagement, going in deep and going in quickly, drawing the enemy out. Reporting back to the main battalion where the enemy is, maybe laying down some suppressing fire and engaging with some armored vehicles just to let that unit know that the Americans are on their way, and then the follow-on forces do the mopping up operation. So these guys, they have to be light, they have to be fast, they have to be tough, and after living with them for the past couple of weeks out in the Kuwaiti desert, I can tell you, Dan, that they are all three and more.
John Roberts is reporting live by video phone as the U.S. Marines highball toward Baghdad. In a companion move, the U.S. Army's 3rd Infantry Division is doing much the same thing. John, stick in here with us, if you will. One's reminded that Napoleon, in another age, another era of warfare, said, and I quote him, "The strength of an army, like the momentum in mechanics, is estimated by the weight multiplied by the velocity. A rapid march exerts a beneficial moral influence on the Army and increases its means of victory," meaning, in effect, that it helps morale. Now, my question to you, John Roberts, if you had a chance to talk to these Marines, is their morale up high, or are they still in sort of wound tight, given that they've only been inside Iraq for a few hours now?
Morale has been very high, Dan. As you know, as a former Marine, morale in the Marine Corps tends to be very high. They are used to living in austere environments, unlike some of their counterparts in other branches of the military. They're used to doing everything with nothing, and so for them, living in the desert hasn't really been the hardship that it might have been for some of the other forces. But the one thing that we ran into time and time again when we were talking with these Marines was this idea that nobody wants to be here, nobody wants to go to war, but they have a job to do, and they would like to get the job done as quickly as possible and go back home. The one thing that we hear all the time is, my main goal here, and let me just, if I could, switch to our remote camera here. The one thing that I hear them say all the time is, we just want to go home. We want to get this done, and we want to go home. But I have to say that after being with them, every time you talk to these Marines, you rarely hear a complaint, unless it's about the fact that it was taking so long. Let me switch back here. And unless you hear from them, it's the fact that it was taking so long for them to get about the business that they do engage in professionally, although they were all hoping as well that if diplomacy was possible to bring this to a resolution, they would support that as well.
John Roberts, we intend to pick you up along the way. I see the dust seems to be thinning out at least a little bit, and however many camels there were off to your left as you rode along there, they seem to be going their own pace in the opposite direction.
Oh. Dan, actually, if we can just get our remote camera up, Randall, there's a shot. Looks like an Iraqi tank out there. And sorry if there's a little bit jittery here, Dan, as we just get this in. That's what appears to be, to my foggy eyes, to be an Iraqi T-72 tank. And that's sitting all by itself out there in the desert. It seems to be in a fighting position. And difficult to say if that tank was hit last night, or if it was abandoned, or what it's doing out there in the desert. But as far as I know, the Marines have not been in Iraq long enough to themselves have dug in some fighting positions. So it's very possible that that is. Let me switch to this. I'm sorry for the shaky camera work here. And if Reynolds is ready, we'll go back to it. That would appear to be an Iraqi tank out there, Dan. Disposition unknown at this point.
John, is it possible it was a tank left over from 1991, hit dead in the turret and just left out there?
You know, Dan, I've never been to this part of the world before, so it's quite possible that that's been there for 12 years, or it's quite possible that it's only been there overnight. Difficult to say.
John Roberts reporting live video phone with U.S. Marines as they pierce deeper into southern Iraq. I hope we can get some pictures up now of the U.S. Army. John Roberts is with elements of the U.S. Marine 1st Division where they have literally their pedal to the metal heading hopefully for the Mesopotamia Valley. And John, is it fair or unfair to say that Marines, whether they have any realistic chance of doing it or not, they would love to beat the Army to the outskirts of Baghdad?
Well, you know, Dan, the Marines always like to be first, and if they could be the first ones to the gates of Baghdad, I'm sure that they would. A little orientation for where we are right now as we just kind of slow down again in the cloud of dust. If you take a look at the front, these are the conditions that we're driving in. To the side, it looks pretty good, but to the front, it often obscures our vision almost totally. We appear to be rolling through a Persian Gulf War I, a Gulf War I battlefield. There's lots of old armament here that's blown into numerous pieces. There are lots of fighting holes in which soldiers would have dug fighting positions in. Don't know which battlefield this is, nor should we probably say which one it is either, because for reasons of operational security, we're being deliberately vague about where we are in the overall scheme of things. But it's safe to say that this is a battlefield left over from 1991. Again, and I stressed this the last time that you and I chatted, Dan, we have so far seen no Iraqi armor, no Iraqi soldiers, no Iraqi vehicles, nothing to suggest that there's anyone out here other than the U.S. Marines, which could be an indication that we're going around the Iraqi positions, or it could also be an indication that the Iraqi divisions have chosen not to fight, either decided to stay in their barracks, or perhaps are engaging in some sort of negotiation to capitulate, or perhaps they're just rounded up in another area and they're far from where we are. Difficult to say, Dan, but I know that the strategy of the U.S. military is to get some of these softer units, the regular Army units, and get them to capitulate in order to minimize the number of casualties, in order to minimize the difficulty in traversing this difficult terrain as they work their way up to Baghdad. Now, going back to what you were initially asked, there have been schedules thrown around of maybe the Army and Marines could be outside of the gates of Baghdad in 3, perhaps 4 days. Now, as one of the commanding colonels, Joe Dowdy, said yesterday, you know, anytime that we go into enemy territory, the enemy has a vote in what happens. He says, and definitely the Iraqis have a vote in what happens. Though the Marines have met little resistance so far, they know that, and this is well documented as well, this is not breaching operational security at all, they know that some of the tougher units of the Republican Guard and the Special Republican Guard, like the Baghdad unit, the Al-Qaeda unit, they are waiting on the roads further north. Those units have been drawn back to protect Baghdad and the road to Baghdad. So while they may have some pretty easy going of it now, with the exception of the choking dust, they know that the road ahead could get much harder in the very near future. Yeah.
John Roberts, want to remind folks that this is coming live through video phone. We didn't have this kind of technology for capability for television at the time of the last Gulf War. It's a small thing, but gives further proof how deep we've gone into information warfare, just one of those small things. Now, John Roberts, for those of you who perhaps are just joining us or need reminding, here's what the situation is. That the British ground forces have moved over toward Basra. In fact, let's go to a different map here. Moved over toward Basra on the southern tip of Iraq, the major port city, the only real big port that the Iraqis have opening into the Persian Gulf. and the British forces have concentrated more or less in this direction. They haven't taken Basra yet, although that is expected. The Marines, somewhere roughly in this area, this is where John Roberts is traveling with the Marines, and the U.S. Marines. And John, as we look at the map here, I don't know that you can tell us how deep you are in Iraq. We're seeing the three-pronged attack. The U.S. Marines basically in the middle there. Some of the British forces are in the west, but also some are approaching Basra, the port of Basra tonight, the British forces. But John, as you go ever deep into Iraq, has there been any contact with the Marines, any firefights, anything of that, or are you still rolling through that old graveyard of Gulf War I relics?
Dan, there has been nothing that we have seen other than just relics of, as you said, Gulf War I. There has been no contact with Iraqi troops. There has been no sighting of Iraqi personnel. It's just the 1st Marine Division, in particular the 2nd Light Armored Reconnaissance Battalion, out here in the desert almost all by itself. And you talk about getting deeper in the desert, we're getting deeper in the sand, it would seem. The road that we're on is a particularly bad one now, very, very deep with sand. But you dare not stray off the road, though, for the fear of landmines. So you have to stay in these ruts, even though some of them will test the ground clearance on a Hummer. And Dan, I was remiss when I was wheeling around our inside cameras here. I forgot to mention a critical member of our personnel. And I know that the shot isn't great because he's very backlit. Patrick Starling, our UK engineer who helped put this all together. Dan?
John Roberts, live with the U.S. Marines in Iraq.
Into and through southern Iraq this morning, CBS News correspondent John Roberts is with the 1st Marine Division. Good morning, John.
Good morning to you, Susan. We're racing across the desert, literally racing across the desert with the Marines 2nd Light Armored Reconnaissance Battalion out of Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. We're doing about 40 miles an hour across the flat open desert now. We've been pushing hard since about 6 o'clock this morning. We actually crossed over the border between Kuwait and Iraq at about 7 o'clock this morning, local time, and we've been pushing hard ever since. Here's a look out the front of the vehicle. As you can see, it's scooting across the desert, what's called a split column formation. And that, we're about to hit some bumps here, so hang on if you would. Split column formation lines up armored vehicles on either side of a line. That's to protect them against any incoming artillery, or if there were to be any bombing from the air or something like that. So we're racing across the desert in that formation. We'll take a look. Actually, sorry, I had the wrong camera. There's a look out the front here as we're racing along through the desert. And here's a look out the back of the vehicle as well. We've encountered a number of interesting things along the way. Most notable was the absolute barrenness of the land in terms of not only the geography, but in terms of the lack of Iraqi forces. We literally have not come across any opposing forces since we crossed the border. There's been a few Bedouins that we've come across who have obviously read the American leaflets that were dropped from the sky that tells them how to comport themselves should they come upon any American forces. We saw a farmer out with a couple of goats. He was holding a white flag above his head that basically said to the American forces as they were coming by, I'm a non-combatant, I don't have any hostile intent toward you. And this light armored reconnaissance battalion just rolled right on by. We also went through what appeared to be a battlefield graveyard from the last Gulf War. A number of tanks were littered about, a number of armored vehicles that were destroyed 12 years ago. But it seems that we also came across some armor that was recently destroyed as well. A couple of tanks that were blown to bits, the scorch marks still visible on them. So I think we have some remnants of the first Gulf War and the second Gulf War already. Now, because of operational security, we're restricted from telling you exactly where we are. We can only say that we've been pushing in at about this speed, stopping every once in a while for about 5.5 hours now, actually inside Iraq. The overall objective, of course, of the American forces is to make it to Baghdad, not just talking about Marines, but Army as well, Special Forces. It would seem that perhaps within a span of anywhere between 2 to 4 days, depending on the resistance they meet, that they'll all meet and they'll meet outside the gates of Baghdad, and then we have to see whether or not there's going to be a large degree of fighting, or whether or not by that time the Iraqi forces may have capitulated. Again, we have not seen any hostile forces on our trek through the desert. There have been other units, though, that have engaged hostile forces. Certainly, though, the areas that we've been in have been the weakest of the Army divisions, the 18th Division, the Iraqi Army, the 51st Division, who were expected to either stay in their barracks or surrender. But ahead of us lie some elite Republican Guard units, the Baghdad unit, the Al-Qaeda unit as well. So things could certainly start to get tougher as the Marines push further northward. I should say that despite the fact that there wasn't expected to be a lot of resistance in the southern part of Iraq, there was an extraordinary amount of bombardment overnight. Artillery was firing at a rate of 1 per second for 30 minutes at a time. They'd take a break, they'd come back at it again for another 30 minutes. And Safwan Hill, which is just north of the Iraqi-Kuwait border, was pounded overnight. It is an observation post. They dropped 20 of those GPS-guided bombs and napalm on it to send a very strong signal to Iraqi forces in the south. This is what you're in for if you take on the Americans. Susan?
All right, John Roberts in southern Iraq. Thank you. By video phone. John, what's the latest?
Good morning to you, Susan. We're in just a little bit of a pause right now. If you take a look at the camera at the front of our vehicle, you see a couple of armored vehicles. The one on the left is a communications vehicle. The one on the right is a 25 millimeter cannon vehicle. We just stopped for a little bit because we've been pushing pretty hard for about 6.5 hours, and they just want to check out the vehicles, make sure that everything else is all right. If you take a look behind us, we're sort of doing the same thing behind us there. It's a fixed shot, so we've not zeroed in on the vehicles, but everybody taking a little bit of a break just to make sure that everything is in order, everything's up and running, because there's still a long, long way to go until they're finished for today. This whole thing began last night at about 9:30. We began to push off from the dispersal areas, which these units moved to after they broke out of those large camps that they had stayed in for about 6 weeks' time. Then they made a push up toward the border where they spent the night. They were supposed to go right through the border in an initial surge, but the orders came later to make a pause once they got to the berm that marks the line of demarcation between Iraq and Kuwait, that demilitarized zone. It's about 5 kilometers wide there. They paused for about 3 hours. It was a dawn push across the border, and that push across the border followed a hailstorm of artillery fire and bombing runs. There was a division of Iraqi forces just to the north of where we were, the 18th Division, and they just came under withering fire. Artillery rounds were dropping at the rate of about 1 per second. They would carry that on for 30 minutes. Bombs were dropping every couple of minutes. There was a hill, well, there still is a hill, what's left of it anyway, it's called Safwan Hill, just north of the Iraqi-Kuwait border. It was an observation post, communications facility. The military dropped 20 of those GPS-guided bombs on the top of it, the JDAMs, which I think weigh in at anywhere between 1,000 and 2,000 pounds, and then lit up the top of the hill with napalm. They just wanted to make a kind of a beacon for the Iraqi forces from the 18th Division and the 51st Division who were there within sight of that hill to say, this is what happens if you resist, and we'll bring the full force and might of the U.S. military on you. I mean, bad news for the people who are on top of that hill. In fact, one of the Marine commanders said we're going to take about 20 feet off of the top of it, and judging by the explosions we heard, they probably did. There's no doubt that the propaganda campaign by the U.S. military, which it has been engaging in for the past few weeks of dropping leaflets to Iraqi forces and civilians, has had some effect. We hear of a lot of surrenders of Iraqi forces. We see civilians and Bedouin farmers along the desert route here as we head northward holding white flags up. And that's not to surrender. That's just to say, I'm a non-combatant, leave me alone. So people here are beginning to get the message. And at least in our sector, we have not seen any fighting at all. We have not even seen one enemy force. We don't know if it's going to continue that way, but for the time being, at least, the Marines are having a pretty good ride of it. We don't know how long that will continue, though. Susan? We've got a couple of other cameras that are up just inside this vehicle. This one seems to have a wee bit of a problem. No, it doesn't. No, sorry, it's just a monitor in front. This is Kirk Spitzer, a colleague of mine who is the former Pentagon correspondent from USA Today, who is taking on the role of navigating us through the difficult ground and terrain of the battlefield. He's found this an interesting experience as well. We were driving yesterday in soft, fluffy sand ruts that were up to 2.5 feet deep, really testing the ground clearance of this vehicle. The sand has a consistency almost like talcum powder on occasion, and it gets up into everything in the vehicle. We had to change out the air filter, the fuel filter today. There's a lot of maintenance that's out of the realm of the ordinary when it comes to being a correspondent or an engineer. We also have one other camera here. We're not rolling yet, so it doesn't really have the intended effect. This is Randall Joyce sitting in the front, who is our esteemed producer out of our London bureau, as well as Kirk and myself. And the only camera that the only person that the camera doesn't pick up this morning is Patrick Starling, who is our engineer who put this whole thing together. And now that the Marine has cleared the field of view out front, we'll show you a look out front as well. That's the camera that will catch all of the action as we're rolling forward.
Well, John, it still looks pretty dusty out there.
Of about 50 miles an hour across open desert.
Looks pretty sandy out there still.
Dan, this is actually a beautiful day. This is actually a beautiful day. We had a little bit of light rain this morning, which, of course, keeps the dust down, and everyone's thankful for that. Cools off the air a little bit, too. We have a little bit of cloud cover in the sky, so the sun isn't really beating down as strongly as it was yesterday. It may look a little bit sandy. There's always a haze in the air. A little bit of that's cloud. It's actually a very nice day here in the southern Iraqi desert, and we're all thankful for that.
John Roberts, live on video phone from somewhere in the northern part of southern Iraq. John, if you can stand by, we're going to switch over to another of our seats. You have an opportunity to interview one of the Marines there. Tell us about it.
I do, Dan. We're just in a staging area right now, getting set to roll out in 3 or 4 minutes. But I thought we'd take this opportunity to meet a real Marine. This is kind of Robert Mitchell, who's been kind enough to accompany us and stay close to us as we travel through the southern desert here in Iraq. And the company has already been split up this morning, or the battalion has been split up this morning. Can you tell us kind of what's going on this morning?
Well, first off, last night we had Bravo Company move forward, do a screen tour north, and earlier this morning Alpha Company pushed forward to do a screen tour west. The rest of the battalion is staying by to follow and trace behind them.
So you've split off a couple of lead elements of this battalion. They've gone forward to check out the terrain ahead, and then you'll bring on the follow-on forces after this?
Exactly, sir.
How is the campaign going so far? I mean, you have a vast experience here in the Gulf area. You're a veteran of Gulf War I.
Yes, sir. Thus far, it's gone pretty much as we planned. Our intelligence officers gave us a very good intelligence before we rolled out yesterday morning. No anticipation we have much enemy forces in our theater, and that so far is exactly how it's unfolded.
Was it surprising to you that there was absolutely no resistance as you came across the border? In fact, between 6 o'clock yesterday morning when we crossed the border and this morning, we have not seen one Iraqi soldier, one piece of Iraqi military equipment other than what was destroyed during the Gulf War.
Somewhat surprising, again, as I said, because of our G2, our intelligence, feeding down the information they did, giving us the indication they did not think there would be any or much enemy in our area. It's exactly how it's unfolded.
Now, do you have a sense that if they're not here, they're somewhere else, or do you have a sense that this campaign may be, in fact, be much easier than some people had laid it out to be?
Personal perception, sir, I think the closer we get to Baghdad, the more we're going to encounter.
Right. And is there anything you could share with us about this morning's operation in terms of where we might be headed?
All I know right now is to the northwest.
The news this morning that the 51st Iraqi Army Division surrendered, how was that taken by the troops?
Overwhelming excitement. I hope it continues to be that way throughout the Iraqi campaign.
All right, very good. Gunner Robert Mitchell, thanks for being with us.
Thanks very much.
We'll see you as we roll on to the north.
John, if I may, could you ask Gunner to stay on there for just one moment? I wanted to ask him something. Could you ask him just a second to hang on?
Stay here just for a second, Gunner Mitchell. Dan rather would like to ask you something. You can ask it through me. Go ahead, Dan.
Well, thank you. First of all, John, he said, and he paused a long time. I noted that. He doesn't want to tell us where he's going, and I don't really want to know. But he said moving toward the northwest. Is it his expectation that eventually, at some point, the Marines will cross the Euphrates River and get into the Mesopotamia Valley?
Dan is asking, obviously, preserving operational security. Is it the Marines' intention to, at some point in the move forward and the move north, to cross the Euphrates River and get into the Mesopotamia Valley?
To the best of our knowledge right now, our planning right now only has us taking up just south of the Euphrates River. Certainly hoping to move forward after that, but right now it's just up to this side of the Euphrates.
Now, a question that Dan asked me yesterday, and I think you probably want to hear from you as well, is it the Marines' intention to be there at the gates of Baghdad at some point in this campaign?
That I can answer, sir.
Is that something that you would like to see the Marines do?
Certainly, I think all of us as Marines would like to be at the gates of Baghdad along with our brothers in the Army and the British.
Dan, anything else for Gunner Mitchell?
Yes, John, I don't want to hold him from his work, but there's been some talk, and I've actually seen this piece of machinery and electronics. Does he or any of his men have the so-called robo-pack? That is the little robot that is pack size that can be used to sort of sort out minefields or do a lot of other work, or do they have this latest piece of equipment?
Dan is wondering about a piece of equipment called a robo-pack that you strap on your back that might be used if you're trying to go forward and detect a minefield, figure out where the mines are. Is that a piece of equipment that the Marines carry?
It's a piece of equipment that I wouldn't be familiar with. Our engineer officer would have better information on that.
Right. You're into guns and bombs and that.
I'm in the standard infantry weapons type of environment.
Right. There you go, Dan.
Thank you very much, John, and thank him for hanging on there. John, I have in mind that the Marines were the first into Kuwait City in the 1991 Gulf War, and part of breaking the back of Saddam Hussein's operation in Kuwait was the Marines quickly reaching Kuwait City. You talk, I'm going to ask you sort of what I asked Jim Axelrod before. When you talk to the captains and the sergeants, the Marines who know what's going on, what's really going on.
I don't mean to interrupt you, Dan, but
sure.
we have to. Dan, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. We have to roll. Let me get back into the vehicle. We have the technology to continue going, so keep asking your question.
Well, do what you have to do. Do what you have to do. Get back in the vehicle, and if you got to roll it, and we'll let you get back in there. Just take a second to do it.
All right, Dan, go ahead.
On. Well, I was remarking, John, that the Marines were the first into Kuwait City in the 1991 Gulf War, but they did that by once they got started, they kept moving. They just kept driving. I get the sense in this operation, and I'm asking you to correct me if I'm wrong, that there's a bit of move forward, then stop, look, listen, regroup, then move forward some more, rather than a pell-mell drive forward.
Dan, I think because this campaign is larger and the terrain that they're operating in is much larger than it was during Gulf War I, that there is that sense of move forward, get a sense of where you are in your position, get a sense of where everyone else is as well. Pause, refuel, make sure that everybody is watered up, fueled up in terms of MREs as well. Get a sense of how the battle plan is changing, because it is changing very quickly, and then you move on from there. Let me just switch to the front camera here as well. I'm pretty boring to look at, so let's get you some terrain that looks a little more interesting. We're heading off, if you will, to catch up with Alpha and Bravo companies, who Gunner Mitchell was saying struck out as a lead element about an hour ago. We've got a combat vehicle in the front. It's called an LAV-25, 25-millimeter cannon on the front of it, same type of cannon that is on the Bradley fighting vehicle, two of those actually out front. Then we're followed by a communications unit called the C-Squared. This is one that can keep in contact with the battalion, with the companies as they go forward, as well as Division Main, and then Gunner Mitchell, who is our escort, is in front of us as well, Dan. But I do agree with you that this is a campaign of moving forward, stopping, regrouping, get an idea of where everybody is, and then move on again. We actually stopped yesterday. We were supposed to only stop for about an hour. We ended up stopping for the entire night. We stopped at about 10 o'clock, and then the lead elements rolled out at about 5 o'clock this morning, and now we, after a wee bit of a delay, are moving out ourselves.
John, I see a tower of some kind up forward to your left. It may be about 11 o'clock. Is that a high line? Is it a communications tower? What is that thing?
It's a power line, Dan, and I don't want to give you the exact location. Actually, what we should probably do is ensure that, and I think if we see just that, we're probably fine, because there is a certain landmark quality to this particular power line. We don't want to show you too much of it because somebody might get a pretty good idea of where we are.
I understand.
But, that is a high-tension power line that's in front of us, Dan. That's correct.
John, about how fast are you going now? Look at the speedometer. How many miles an hour are you traveling along there?
Oh, it's only about 10 miles an hour now, Dan. We just ran into some washboard ruts here along the desert underneath this power line, but we should be starting to tick it up a little bit. I imagine as we chase down the lead group, we'll probably get up to about 40, 50 miles an hour in this run through the desert.
John, when you talk to the captains and sergeants and the other Marines down in the ranks, are they still at a heightened state of worry about the possible use of chemical and biological weapons, or is that beginning, even in a wee small way, to fade in the background of their minds?
I think, Dan, it's a little less so now than it was even when we were in the...
Well, we seem to have lost John's audio there. This video phone has worked amazingly well. I believe we've lost John's audio for the moment.
Dan, do you still have us?
We have you back now, John. We lost you there for a second.
I think we're back now. I think we're back.
Fine. John, one thing
I think it's probably that the high tension wires interfere with the satellite transmission.
Right. But John, this gives us an opportunity to say that there were a lot of questions about embedding journalists with U.S. military units before the war actually started. From a distance, it appears to so far have worked extremely well, and one's tempted to give a tip of the Stetson to Tory Clark and Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld for reversing the very tight, no access, very little information policy of the Afghanistan campaign and opening up in this one. But I'm interested in your view on the ground and rolling with these Marines, how it's worked.
Well, Dan, I agree with something that you said was a little more than a month ago, I think, as we were preparing for this whole process, that there is a very fine line between being embedded and being entombed. And there was a real question as to whether or not if we got deep in with the unit as it was rolling through the desert, we'd ever be able to transmit. So what I really have to do is, if you would allow me to, is give a tip of the Stetson to these two fellows. You see Engineer Patrick Starling's hair here in this three-shot, and to Kirk Spitzer, and as well to Randall Joyce, our producer out of London, who's taking a helicopter ride up to the front this morning. They spent an awfully long time not only putting together this extraordinary vehicle, which allows us to broadcast as we travel with the units, but they spent a long time getting to know this unit as well. I came into it about almost 3 weeks ago and started to get to know folks, but they've almost been living with them out here in the desert since the moment that they touched down. There's also a past relationship between.
Well, once again, it's a wonder it didn't happen earlier. We've, as you can see, we lost the audio and got a freeze frame on the video phone.